The sky was bruised purple, heavy with clouds that churned as if hesitant to witness the cruelty of man. It was dawn, but the sun, ashamed perhaps, had not yet shown its face. Beneath this brooding sky sprawled a village forgotten by time, nestled within a valley steeped in shadow. On mornings like these, the fog rose like ghosts from the earth, drifting lazily through narrow alleys, twisting around low clay walls, whispering through thatched roofs where chimneys breathed their smoky sighs. Life stirred gently, barely perceptible at first, like reluctant feet shuffling across wooden floors, a rustle of fabric being tugged upon sleep-heavy bodies. Soon, voices would murmur, pots would clink, and daily chores would resume their endless cycle. But today was different. Today, life hesitated, as if aware of some invisible menace lurking at the edges of the village, observing silently, hungrily. For within the village square stood a newly constructed wooden structure, crude but imposing, casting long, foreboding shadows. It was neither gallows nor gibbet, but a simple raised platform that sent a tremor of anxiety rippling quietly through the hearts of villagers who glanced its way. For today, a man would be condemned not by blade, rope, or bullet, but by salt. A sentence ancient, obscure, brutal in its slowness, insidious in its cruelty. A punishment designed not merely to end life, but to unravel it slowly, thread by agonizing thread, until sanity and dignity crumbled long before death. Word had passed like wildfire through the village of the sentenced man's name, Petros Varga, a name everyone knew, though many had grown quiet at the mention of it lately, eyes downcast, tongues careful. Petros was neither outsider nor stranger. He was known to everyone here, a neighbor, a craftsman who had repaired their roofs, sharpened their tools, broken bread at their tables. Petros, who had once saved young Tomas from the river's deadly embrace, who had gently tended the injuries of a lamb belonging to old Marta. Yet today, Petros was not friend nor savior, not craftsman nor healer. Today, Petros Varga was condemned, accused, branded by whispers and verdicts, guilty of crimes which felt vague, obscured by rumor and doubt, as nebulous and sinister as the mists rolling across the village streets. Crimes whispered to be terrible enough to warrant this most ancient of punishments. Crimes that needed neither proof nor witness in a court that served justice swiftly, decisively, and without remorse. At dawn, villagers gathered cautiously around the square, silent and solemn, casting wary glances at the crude wooden platform, as if it were a living, breathing thing, some monstrous altar ready to swallow humanity whole. They came slowly, stepping lightly, fear guiding their feet, curiosity compelling their eyes. Faces appeared pale beneath the gray sky, weary eyes rimmed red from sleepless nights filled with troubled dreams and whispered prayers. The elders, grim and silent, formed a loose circle around the platform. They stood straight and unmoving, their lined faces carved from stone, their eyes inscrutable beneath heavy brows. The village elder, a man named Andres Kovacs, stepped forward slowly, his gait stiff and deliberate. Time had turned his once dark hair a dirty gray, his strong shoulders stooped beneath the weight of decades spent dispensing wisdom and judgment. With a gesture, Andres summoned forth Petros, whose wrists were bound before him in crude hemp rope. He moved slowly, deliberately, his expression unreadable, perhaps resigned, perhaps defiant, as if some private inner battle raged beneath his quiet exterior. Petros climbed onto the wooden platform, the boards creaking beneath his weight, amplifying the silence that enveloped the square. Andres raised his voice, cutting through the morning silence like a blade. "Petros Varga," he began, words heavy with authority, yet dry as brittle parchment. "You stand accused of the gravest sins, betrayal, theft, crimes against the trust and safety of this community. By ancient decree and solemn verdict, your punishment is sealed by salt." The elder paused, the gathered villagers holding their breath. The air thick and stifling despite the chill. Petros stood silently, staring forward, his face betraying nothing but quiet resignation. "This punishment," Andres continued, voice trembling slightly despite himself, "is not merely to end your life, but to strip you slowly of all that binds you to the living, your humanity, your dignity, your very essence. Salt shall cleanse your sins with pain, with thirst, with madness. until, finally, death shall offer you its mercy." Andres raised his arm, and 2 village men stepped forward from the gathered crowd, dragging a large wooden vat, its weight evident by their strained muscles and sweating brows. Within this container, white crystals glittered ominously, salt, pure and deadly, innocent yet merciless. Carefully, deliberately, the men lifted Petros and placed him within this vat, seating him atop the mountain of salt, arranging him so his body was upright and visible to all who might witness this slow spectacle of agony. Petros made no sound, offered no resistance. He seemed lost, already distant, his eyes gazing beyond the village, beyond the mountains, beyond this world that had turned against him. Another villager stepped forward, bringing a large wooden bucket of water. Slowly, he poured the water over Petros, soaking his clothes, drenching his skin. And then another bucket. And another. Salt clung hungrily to wet skin, burning flesh slowly, insidiously, each crystal a tiny tormentor determined to strip the soul from the body. There was no scream, no pleading, no struggle. Only silence, heavy and terrible, broken only by the quiet sobbing of a woman at the edge of the crowd, who buried her face against her husband's shoulder, unable to watch further. "It has begun," announced Andres, quietly yet clearly. His voice echoed gently, hauntingly, across the silent square. "It will continue until your body submits and your soul is judged." Slowly, the villagers dispersed, each returning to lives suddenly uncertain and fearful. Some cast fleeting glances toward Petros, others refused to look, guilt and pity warring silently in their hearts. As the hours crept forward, the village returned to its daily routines. Children chased chickens along dirt paths. Laundry flapped gently in the rising wind. Farmers bent backs to fields grown dry beneath a sky refusing to yield rain. But behind each daily chore lay a shadow, a ghostly reminder of Petros atop his salt throne, slowly, silently suffering beneath an unforgiving sky. From time to time, villagers passed by the square, casting hurried, anxious glances toward the vat where Petros sat unmoving, skin blistered by invisible fire, eyes staring blankly into the distance. Words spread softly from lips to ears, that he had not cried out, not spoken a single word, that perhaps he was already slipping away, escaping his tormentors within the safety of his own mind. By nightfall, the square grew silent once more, shadows stretching long beneath a moon hidden by dark clouds. Villagers locked doors tight, barred windows firmly, as if afraid Petros' agony might seep through cracks and crevices, reaching inside their homes, tainting their own dreams with the cruelty they had condoned. But Petros remained alone beneath the indifferent stars, bound in salt, trapped in slow agony, beneath a sky indifferent to the cruelty of men. The village slept restlessly, haunted by what they had witnessed, by the silent suffering of a man they once called neighbor, friend, brother. They dreamed dark dreams filled with shadows and whispers, dreamed of judgment yet to come, feared that perhaps salt would judge them too, silently, invisibly, eternally. And thus began the slow unraveling, the last execution by salt, a death destined to stretch 40 days, beneath skies that refused to witness, and a village that no longer slept soundly beneath their gaze. Daylight seeped hesitantly into the village, carrying with it a sense of apprehension and guilt. As the horizon slowly awakened, villagers found themselves in quiet conflict, afraid to confront the cruelty they'd set in motion yet compelled by the aching curiosity of their own dark fascination. The village square drew their gazes irresistibly, their eyes darting toward the wooden vat as they hurried past, stealing glances of the silent figure bound by salt. Petros remained motionless, his form now rigid, his expression vacant, a man turning to stone beneath the scorching weight of his punishment. His skin was blistered raw, glistening in places with translucent fluid, a grotesque and painful mosaic of salt crystals embedded into inflamed flesh. And yet, he uttered no complaint, not a whisper or moan escaped his cracked lips. Andres Kovacs had returned early that morning, lingering at the edge of the square as though unwilling to venture further. His eyes carried a heaviness, revealing a man caught between duty and doubt, authority and remorse. It was said softly among the villagers that he had not slept, pacing the floors of his modest home, mumbling old prayers, wrestling privately with the punishment he himself had declared. Nearby, the baker's shop filled the morning air with warm, inviting scents: fresh bread, sweet pastries dusted with sugar, delicate treats formed by calloused hands well acquainted with flour and dough. Yet today the aroma seemed tainted, mingled perversely with the harshness of salt and suffering just yards away. A few villagers clustered near the bakery window, eager to distract themselves with mundane comforts, whispering hushed words of unease as they avoided meeting each other's gaze. Old Marta, her face deeply etched with the memories of countless village happenings, moved carefully through her small herb garden. She plucked sprigs of lavender and rosemary, pausing occasionally to wipe her eyes. The lamb Petros had once helped now grazed peacefully beside her, unaware of the turmoil surrounding its protector's fate. Marta muttered softly, whispering quiet prayers, begging forgiveness, for herself, for the village, for Petros, whose punishment seemed to weigh heavily upon her frail shoulders. As the sun climbed higher, whispers grew louder. Speculations of Petros' guilt and innocence wove a tangled web through village streets and homes, sowing seeds of distrust and fear that blossomed unchecked. Some whispered he was innocent, a victim of envy and malice, wrongly accused by those who wished him harm. Others believed wholeheartedly in his guilt, convinced he hid a dark heart beneath a gentle demeanor. Still others, uncertain and afraid, hid their own doubts behind carefully chosen words and cautious neutrality. Fearful of judgment, fearful of suspicion, fearful of being marked as sympathizers or traitors themselves, they retreated into quiet, tense silence. Friendships frayed, families argued in hushed tones behind closed doors, and neighbors turned their faces away rather than risk confrontation. But life, even in shadow, had to continue. Children played beneath the shade of willow trees, weaving intricate patterns from dried grasses and wild flowers, whispering stories that mirrored the turmoil of their elders. Fathers and mothers gathered around tables, sharing food with muted voices and anxious glances, their meals flavored with guilt that had seeped into every corner of village life. In the center of it all, Petros lingered, caught in his own relentless battle. Time slowed for him, each minute stretched into eternity, each heartbeat echoing like a dull drum within his chest. He drifted in and out of consciousness, lost in fevered dreams where memories merged with nightmares, reality blurred by agony and thirst. The salt drew moisture relentlessly from his skin, his lips cracking deeply, his tongue swollen and dry. Yet he remained defiant, resolutely silent, refusing to offer even a whisper of pain or surrender. Occasionally, curious villagers, driven by equal parts pity and fascination, crept close enough to witness the terrible transformation. Petros, once vital and strong, seemed diminished, his form shrinking beneath the salt's merciless assault. His eyes were often closed, but when opened, they held a distant, haunting quality, peering beyond the village, beyond his tormentors, beyond the very boundaries of this world. Among these reluctant visitors was Ilona, a young woman who had known Petros since childhood. Once, long ago. Beneath the same willow trees that now shaded playing children, they'd whispered promises and secrets, their young hearts dreaming of futures bright and untroubled. Life had separated them, their paths diverging into adulthood, yet in these moments of quiet suffering, Ilona felt herself drawn irresistibly back to the boy she'd once loved. She stood silently near the edge of the square, hidden in the shadow of an old oak, watching Petros with tears staining her cheeks. Her heart twisted painfully, memories resurfacing with startling clarity. The warmth of his hand in hers, the softness of his voice when he laughed, the gentle strength he'd shown in all things. Now she saw only pain, only torment, only a slow descent into darkness from which he might never escape. Ilona ached to rush forward, to offer comfort, a touch, even a whisper to break the relentless silence. But fear gripped her, fear of judgment, fear of becoming an outcast herself. And so, heartbroken and ashamed, she turned away, leaving Petros alone once more beneath an unforgiving sun. Days slipped past with brutal slowness. The villagers began to adjust to the presence of Petros' punishment, each day adding another layer of numbness to their consciences. Routine tasks continued, yet beneath every moment lay a thick, palpable tension. The marketplace bustled less enthusiastically, laughter became rare, replaced by low murmurs and anxious glances. The younger generation, too innocent to understand fully, questioned their parents with wide, confused eyes. "Why?" they asked, simple and direct. And the elders, who might once have spoken confidently of justice and punishment, found their words faltering, unable to clearly explain the reasons behind such cruelty. They muttered vague responses, averting their eyes, praying quietly for an end, both to Petros' suffering and to their own shameful complicity. In the darkness of his restless nights, Andras Kovacs paced, driven by doubt and growing horror. He knew himself to be a good man, respected and trusted. Yet now, in the private solitude of his home, he questioned his decision. Had he acted too hastily? Had he allowed fear and superstition to dictate justice? He tried desperately to silence his own mind, to convince himself of righteousness, yet sleep eluded him, guilt gnawed incessantly at the corners of his conscience. Meanwhile, in his slow agony, Petros endured, weakened but unwavering. He'd become a monument, an object of pity and shame, of silent suffering. His body had deteriorated further, skin peeling away, raw flesh exposed beneath glittering salt crystals. Yet he held on, refusing to succumb entirely to the encroaching darkness. By the 10th day, whispers spread anew. Villagers spoke softly of miracles, or curses, claims that Petros still lived, still breathed despite all expectations. Superstition swirled rapidly. Some believed Petros was protected by unseen forces, others convinced he was sustained by some dark power, his survival unnatural, ominous. Fear intensified, paranoia twisted reality, and the village trembled beneath the weight of secrets and whispered truths. And as night fell once more, the moon watched silently from above, casting silver light upon the village. Petros sat motionless, a shadowed figure bound by suffering, yet strangely dignified in defiance. Alone beneath indifferent stars, he awaited judgment, whether from man, fate, or something greater and far beyond comprehension. And around him, a village lay restless, hearts heavy with unease and uncertainty, knowing deep down that this slow execution was not merely the death of Petros, but the slow unraveling of their own humanity, painfully, relentlessly, grain by unforgiving grain. The days moved with reluctant heaviness, each sunrise breaking the spell of darkness only to renew the village's silent torment. By the 15th day, Petros had transformed into something neither fully living nor completely dead, caught in a terrible limbo, suspended by agony and salt. He sat unmoving, yet every eye drawn unwillingly to him could sense that life still lingered, fragile yet fiercely defiant. Around him, the village sank further into quiet despair. Daily tasks became joyless repetitions of habit. Faces grew haggard, eyes haunted by sleepless nights spent tossing and turning, tormented by dreams of Petros and whispered accusations. Anxiety gripped them tighter with each passing day, fear festered like a dark rot beneath carefully maintained masks of neutrality. For beneath the surface, the village had become divided, an invisible fracture running deep through every home, every family, every friendship. Those who believed in Petros' innocence nursed quiet anger and resentment, eyes darkening whenever accusations were repeated. Those who trusted in his guilt grew defensive and suspicious, watching neighbors closely, questioning loyalties and friendships once taken for granted. And in the center, Andras Kovacs stood uncertainly, the lines on his face etched deeper each day. His nights were filled with restless pacing, haunted by thoughts he could not silence, questions he could no longer answer confidently. Guilt gnawed at him relentlessly, a quiet voice whispering constantly of his mistake. Yet pride and fear of losing authority kept him silent, holding fast to the facade of justice and resolve. On the outskirts of the village, Ilona moved quietly through her days, heart burdened by memories and loss. Each morning she awoke haunted by images of Petros, his eyes distant yet defiant, his silence a fierce accusation. Unable to bear the oppressive grief alone, she sought comfort at Marta's humble home, finding solace in the older woman's gentle wisdom and quiet strength. Together, the two women spoke softly of memories and regrets, sharing stories of the gentle, thoughtful man Petros had always been. Marta recounted warmly how Petros had saved her lamb, how carefully he'd bandaged its injured leg, patiently nursing it back to health. Ilona whispered shy recollections of youthful laughter, stolen moments beneath willow trees, the warmth of his hand holding hers in innocence and trust. Yet even as they shared their grief, bitterness lingered, tinged with helplessness. What good were memories, when the present held only cruelty and silence? Within the village square, the wooden vat stood silent witness, its surface shimmering harshly beneath the sun's relentless gaze. Petros seemed barely human, his form desiccated, his body a fragile husk beneath layers of merciless salt. His chest rose and fell shallowly, scarcely visible, as if even breath were a luxury now denied him. Yet villagers still came, furtive glances at first, then bolder, their curiosity unquenchable despite their horror. Some whispered quiet prayers, crossing themselves quickly before hurrying away, guilt following at their heels. Others stood quietly, faces pale, hearts heavy with silent complicity. No one could look away completely, drawn helplessly to this slow spectacle of suffering. On the 21st day, Petros opened his eyes fully for the first time in days, his gaze sweeping slowly across the square. His vision blurred, distorted by heat and thirst, yet he sensed vaguely the faces turned toward him, eyes wide, expressions uneasy, afraid, ashamed. Gathering what strength remained, Petros raised his head slightly, his eyes finding Andres standing hesitantly at the square's edge. A silent question passed between them, a shared understanding, layered with accusation and regret. Petros' eyes held no hatred, only sadness, resignation, a quiet plea. Andres felt his throat tighten painfully, his heart hammering heavily within his chest. For a moment, he nearly stepped forward, words of regret rising like bitter bile. But fear held him still, pride binding him silently to the terrible decision he made. With great effort, Petros lowered his gaze again, the brief connection broken, leaving Andres haunted by the intensity of that silent exchange. He turned away abruptly, returning home with shoulders bowed and heart heavy with a guilt he could no longer deny. The following days stretched painfully onward, villagers living beneath the shadow of their silent sin. Beneath the routine of daily chores and obligations, doubts spread steadily, suspicion blossoming in the quiet darkness of whispered conversations. The fabric of community unraveled. Trust fraying beneath the weight of uncertainty and guilt. Friendships grew tense, greetings clipped, eyes diverted from each other's gaze. Children, sensing the undercurrent of unease, grew quieter, their laughter less frequent. Games were subdued, their young hearts absorbing anxieties they did not fully understand. Parents watched their children silently, guilt twisting sharply in their chests at innocence tainted by adult cruelty. By the 30th day, whispers swirled more fiercely, speculation of why Petros had not yet succumbed, rumors of dark power sustaining him, fear that punishment had become a curse upon the village itself. The elders met quietly, faces grim beneath flickering candlelight, uncertainty hanging heavily within their hushed debates. No decision was reached, each man afraid to voice aloud the doubts they all harbored privately. Meanwhile, in private corners of homes, hushed conversations turned to prayers, some villagers silently begging for forgiveness, others pleading for relief. Candles burned through long nights as villagers sought solace in faith and ritual, searching desperately for meaning within the darkness that had overtaken their lives. For Petros himself, days and nights blurred together, pain becoming an endless, numbing companion. He drifted in and out of consciousness, lost in dreams and memories mingled chaotically. Images came to him vividly, Ilona's gentle laughter, Marta's grateful smile, the warm earth beneath his fingers as he tended the fields. Yet reality always intruded painfully, salt crystals burning deep into his skin, relentless thirst and hunger clawing at his sanity. Still, he refused to surrender completely. His body weakened steadily, flesh dried and cracked beneath cruel salt, yet his mind clung fiercely to dignity and quiet defiance. He had not begged, not cried, not given his tormentors satisfaction in witnessing his pain. His silence had become his final rebellion, powerful in its quiet determination. On the 35th day, a storm brewed silently upon the horizon, dark clouds gathering ominously, heavy and oppressive. Wind whispered through the village, carrying tension thickly in its currents. Villagers hurried nervously through tasks, sensing instinctively a reckoning approached, yet uncertain what form it might take. In the village square, Petros lifted his gaze slowly toward the darkening sky, sensing somehow the shift in air, the change in atmosphere. Perhaps, he thought vaguely, the storm would end his torment at last, washing away his pain and theirs in a cleansing, merciful rain. Andras Kovacs stood at his window, staring outward with troubled eyes. He too sensed something approaching, a judgment, perhaps, or simply nature's fury unleashed. His heart hammered painfully in his chest, guilt twisting sharply. He knew himself responsible, knew deep down he'd committed a terrible error. Yet pride and fear held him immobile, unable to voice aloud what his conscience screamed. The wind grew stronger, sweeping through village streets with increasing fury, carrying whispers and secrets into every corner, every home. Candles flickered uncertainly, doors rattled anxiously, villagers holding their breath in tense anticipation. Above, clouds churned darkly, lightning flashing briefly, illuminating starkly the silent figure of Petros bound in salt, waiting for mercy or death beneath an unforgiving sky. Then, abruptly, the skies opened violently, rain pouring down heavily, fiercely, a sudden torrent washing mercilessly through village streets. Villagers hurried indoors, seeking shelter from nature's wrath, peering cautiously outward at the deluge. Yet in the square, Petros remained unmoving, rain pounding relentlessly upon him, dissolving salt slowly, painfully from skin blistered and raw. Water streamed freely across his form, stinging harshly, yet cleansing, merciful in its cruelty. Petros lifted his head slowly, his eyes closing gently as rain washed through salt-encrusted hair and flesh. A quiet sigh escaped cracked lips, a faint whisper carried away by the storm, relief mingled with final surrender. And around him, a village watched silently, hearts heavy with remorse and fear, wondering quietly if this sudden storm were nature's judgment, a chance at redemption, or merely a brief reprieve before darkness descended once more. The storm subsided gradually, as though reluctant to relinquish the village from its grasp. Raindrops fell softer now, tapping rhythmically against thatched roofs, sliding down window panes like silent tears. The sky, heavy and somber, lingered in shades of muted gray, casting the village in a solemn twilight. Petros breathed slowly beneath the gentle rain, his body trembling weakly beneath the dissolving salt. His skin, raw and tender, stung bitterly with each droplet, yet the torment seemed somehow softer now, a purifying pain that held within it whispers of redemption. Though broken and diminished, something in him stirred, fragile yet persistent, a quiet determination refusing to surrender entirely to despair. Villagers, tentative and cautious, began emerging slowly from their homes, compelled by curiosity and guilt, drawn irresistibly toward the center of the village. They approached silently, eyes wide and uncertain beneath the drizzling rain, their breaths forming faint mist in the chill air. The salt vat stood resolute, its contents greatly diminished by the storm. Crystals melted away in rivulets, running from the wooden container like tears, pooling upon the muddy earth. Petros' figure, now thin and frail, sat hunched forward, breathing shallowly, yet unmistakably alive. Andras Kovacs stepped forward from among the gathered villagers, his footsteps heavy, the burden of his conscience visible in every line of his weary face. He paused briefly, taking in the scene, the vat half empty, Petros pale and battered, villagers watching silently with eyes filled with accusation and sorrow. "This is enough," Andras whispered, voice barely audible. But the words carried powerfully through the silent square. The punishment must end. No voice rose in protest. No one dared challenge his authority. The village elder approached slowly, eyes cast downward, burdened by shame. Reaching out gently, Andras placed a trembling hand upon Petros' shoulder. Petros stirred weakly, lifting his gaze slowly toward the elder. Their eyes met, a silent exchange charged with understanding, regret, forgiveness. Petros, despite all he'd suffered, held no hatred, no accusation, only quiet resignation, sadness, and a fragile trace of hope. With great care, villagers moved forward, gently lifting Petros from the dissolving salt, his body light and fragile in their arms. They carried him carefully from the square, through streets heavy with silence, beneath windows where others watched quietly, faces pale with remorse. He was taken to Marta's humble home, where soft bedding awaited him, blankets woven by careful hands placed gently across his battered body. Ilona moved close, her eyes filled with tears as she wiped his forehead gently with cool cloth. Marta murmured quiet prayers, her voice soothing as she prepared a simple broth, nourishment offered softly, patiently to lips long cracked and bleeding. In the days that followed, Petros lay quietly within the small room, hovering precariously between life and death. His fever spiked violently, then ebbed. His breathing labored painfully, then softened gradually. Marta and Ilona watched tirelessly over him, offering comfort and care, their own exhaustion visible yet ignored in the shadow of Petros' slow struggle for life. Word spread quickly through the village. Petros had survived, his punishment mercifully ended, his life now entrusted to the compassionate care of women who believed wholeheartedly in his innocence. Some villagers felt relief wash through their hearts, a burden lifted, a chance perhaps at redemption and forgiveness. Others, uncertain and conflicted, kept their distance, guilt and shame weaving intricate knots within their consciences. Andras Kovacs, burdened heavily by regret, kept himself largely hidden, wrestling privately with the consequences of his authority. He wandered frequently at the village outskirts, staring outward across the fields, searching for answers, clarity that remained elusive beneath the weight of his troubled thoughts. He questioned himself relentlessly, haunted by Petros' eyes, by the silent dignity and defiance he'd shown even amidst unbearable torment. In the quiet of Marta's home, Petros regained consciousness slowly, emerging gently from fevered dreams into a reality softened by care and kindness. He spoke rarely, his voice thin and brittle, each word precious and sparing. Yet, gradually, life returned to his eyes, fragile yet unmistakable, a quiet flame of resilience burning softly within. Ilona remained constantly by his side, holding his hand gently in hers, speaking softly of happier days, youthful dreams beneath willow trees, innocent laughter and whispered secrets. Her voice soothed Petros deeply, anchoring him gently within memories untouched by cruelty or fear. As days became weeks, Petros' strength returned slowly, his body healing beneath careful attention. He stood again upon unsteady feet, walking carefully through Marta's garden beneath the gentle warmth of morning sun. Villagers watched from afar, drawn irresistibly to witness his slow recovery, their hearts heavy yet hopeful beneath the complicated emotions stirred by his presence. Yet even as his body healed, the scars remained, deeply etched upon flesh and spirit alike. His eyes, though gentle, carried shadows, haunted by memories, a quiet sadness lingering beneath resilience. Villagers noticed, feeling remorse sharpen painfully each time they glimpsed the quiet dignity Petros maintained despite everything he'd suffered. One evening, beneath skies painted softly in shades of amber and violet, Petros sat quietly with Ilona beneath the old willow trees. Their hands intertwined gently, hearts speaking silently, words rendered unnecessary by shared understanding and quiet affection. Ilona broke the silence softly, her voice trembling gently. "Why did you endure it, Petros? Why didn't you cry out?" Petros lifted his gaze slowly toward the sky, breathing deeply, thoughtfully. When he finally spoke, his voice carried quiet strength, a dignity untouched by suffering. "Because sometimes silence speaks louder than any scream. Sometimes, refusing to surrender is the only way to truly win." His words lingered gently between them, carried softly upon evening winds. Ilona leaned closer, resting her head softly against his shoulder, finding comfort and strength in his quiet determination. In the days that followed, the village slowly, cautiously began to heal, though the wounds ran deeply, scars etched into hearts and memories. Villagers sought tentative reconciliation, awkward apologies whispered softly, forgiveness offered gently yet cautiously. Slowly, trust began to mend, the fractured community pulling itself hesitantly back together beneath shared regret and quiet hope. Yet some remained distant, Andras Kovacs among them. Unable to forgive himself fully, he lingered silently upon village outskirts, burdened heavily by guilt and shame. Villagers watched quietly, unsure how to offer comfort, how to bridge the quiet chasm he'd carved between himself and those he'd once led confidently. Meanwhile, Petros continued slowly recovering beneath Marta's gentle care, finding solace within simple routines, tending the herb garden, mending small tools, quiet conversations with Ilona beneath willow branches whispering softly with each gentle breeze. Yet even amidst healing, Petros carried quiet sadness, a part of himself irrevocably changed, innocence lost beneath cruelty and suffering. He pondered often the nature of human hearts, how easily kindness gave way to fear, compassion surrendered swiftly to suspicion. He questioned quietly the meaning of justice, the fragile nature of dignity and trust. And as villagers watched quietly, they too questioned themselves, hearts heavy, souls searching deeply beneath quiet remorse. They began slowly understanding that punishment had not fallen upon Petros alone, but upon them all, judgment reflected back sharply by mirrors held silently within their own consciences. Thus the village moved forward slowly, hesitantly, lives resuming gently, yet forever altered by cruelty and suffering they'd condoned silently. Hearts remained scarred yet hopeful beneath remorse, and forgiveness offered hesitantly. Gently, beneath quiet skies that had borne silent witness to cruelty and compassion alike. And in the center of it all, Petros lived quietly, a silent symbol of resilience and dignity, his quiet presence speaking powerfully, teaching gently the value of mercy, forgiveness, and humanity regained carefully, lovingly, grain by gentle grain. The village began to find itself again, slowly returning to rhythms of daily life. Yet each moment now carried the echo of past sorrow, shadows of guilt softened gradually by cautious hope. Evenings grew gentle once more, laughter, though hesitant, returned to village gatherings, shared meals now flavored subtly with forgiveness. Yet beneath every softened smile, behind every gentle greeting, lingered quiet scars, faded yet permanent reminders of their shared complicity, etched deeply into the village's collective heart. Petros continued healing, his presence in Marta's humble home a quiet, steady heartbeat within village life. Though he rarely ventured far, villagers passing near Marta's small cottage would glimpse him tending her herbs or gently speaking with Ilona beneath the familiar sheltering branches of the willow trees. His body, though forever marked by cruelty, had slowly reclaimed strength, his movements now careful yet sure, dignity carried quietly in every deliberate action. Ilona remained faithfully by his side, their bond rekindled tenderly amidst pain and recovery. Villagers, watching from afar, felt quiet gratitude, a silent acknowledgement of the gentleness and resilience that held Petros upright despite cruelty endured. Many who once turned their faces in fear or shame now offered gentle nods, quiet greetings filled softly with apology, gratitude, or simply the quiet desire for reconciliation. Andras Kovacs, however, lingered quietly at the village's edge, a ghostly figure burdened by guilt and pride. He had withdrawn almost entirely, leaving the leadership he'd once held confidently, now seeking solitude to wrestle privately with his conscience. He wandered often across fields and meadows, alone beneath open skies, searching silently for answers, forgiveness, a path forward now obscured by shadows of his own making. One morning, as sunlight painted softly the village rooftops, Petros sat alone in Marta's garden, his fingers gently brushing rosemary stems, inhaling deeply their comforting fragrance. He heard footsteps approaching softly behind him, slow yet certain, a hesitant yet deliberate tread. Turning slowly, Petros met Andras's gaze. The elder stood awkwardly, shoulders bowed beneath guilt's invisible weight, eyes uncertain yet resolute. Silence stretched gently between them, filled quietly with 1,000 unsaid words, apologies unspoken yet deeply felt. Finally, Andras spoke, voice low and trembling slightly. "Petros, I've wronged you deeply. I can't ask your forgiveness, but I wish you to know that my heart carries this guilt forever." Petros watched the older man silently, seeing clearly the heavy burden he carried. Slowly, deliberately, he reached forward, placing one hand softly upon Andras's shoulder. "We both bear scars now," Petros replied quietly, eyes gentle yet serious. "Perhaps forgiveness is a gift we offer one another, slowly, with care." Andres inhaled sharply, eyes brightening slightly beneath the quiet weight of those gentle words. A faint, hesitant smile crossed his lips, gratitude flickering quietly within his troubled expression. He nodded slowly, words unnecessary as quiet understanding passed softly between them. From that morning onward, Andres slowly returned to village life, not as leader, but as a humbled man seeking quiet redemption. He found solace working gently alongside villagers, mending fences, helping with harvests, sharing quiet meals beneath gentle evening skies. Gradually, villagers forgave quietly, gently, accepting him back beneath the quiet bond of shared suffering and redemption slowly unfolding within their hearts. As days passed into weeks, and weeks softened gently into months, the village reclaimed itself, scarred yet wiser, hearts carrying quietly lessons learned in pain and compassion alike. Daily life resumed with cautious normalcy. Trust rebuilt carefully, friendships mended softly beneath shared memories and quiet forgiveness. Petros and Ilona, too, grew closer beneath gentle skies, hearts once wounded now entwined tenderly. Their love, strengthened by suffering shared, blossomed softly within quiet moments beneath willow branches whispering gently, memories mingling sweetly with quiet hopes for futures yet unwritten. Villagers watched their gentle affection quietly, hearts warmed softly by the healing presence Petros had quietly become within their midst. Gradually, memories of cruelty faded gently into shadows, replaced carefully by images of quiet dignity, resilience, humanity reclaimed tenderly amidst suffering. Slowly, the village square, once scene of cruelty and silence, returned softly to daily use. Wooden platforms and crude salt vats were dismantled gently, their materials repurposed thoughtfully into tools, benches, tables, objects of community and comfort rather than instruments of torment. Children played freely once more beneath open skies, innocent laughter echoing sweetly through village streets, healing quietly beneath every joyful sound. Evenings grew gentle again, villagers gathering softly beneath twilight skies, sharing quiet conversations flavored with laughter, forgiveness, and gentle reconciliation. Hearts remained forever changed, yet hope bloomed tenderly within their softened souls, humanity reclaimed gently, compassion renewed carefully, lovingly, beneath shared lessons learned in silence and suffering. One quiet evening, as stars slowly blossomed across velvet skies, Petros stood silently at village outskirts, gazing outward thoughtfully. Ilona moved quietly beside him, her hand gently finding his, warmth and comfort passing softly between them. "Do you still feel pain, Petros?" she asked softly, eyes gentle, voice carrying quiet concern. Petros considered carefully, his gaze lingering upon distant mountains touched softly by moonlight. When he finally spoke, his voice held quiet reflection, deep yet gentle. "Pain, yes. But pain is part of life, Ilona, woven gently within every joy, every sorrow. It reminds us gently of our humanity, teaching quietly compassion, mercy, forgiveness." She smiled softly, leaning closer against him, finding quiet strength within his gentle words. Together, they stood silently beneath gentle skies, hearts entwined softly by quiet hope, lessons of suffering and resilience carried gently forward within their souls. The village slept gently now beneath velvet skies, hearts quietly at peace, forgiveness softly embraced. They dreamed gently of brighter tomorrows, understanding quietly that cruelty was not their final legacy, but resilience, compassion, humanity reclaimed softly, gently, beneath quiet lessons of dignity and forgiveness carefully learned. And so, beneath gentle moonlight, the village slowly, softly reclaimed itself, souls forever scarred yet beautifully human, hearts quietly humbled yet strengthened tenderly beneath quiet resilience. They lived softly, gently beneath skies that had borne witness silently to cruelty and compassion, hearts forever bound gently by memories quietly softened into wisdom. Thus, beneath stars quietly watching, the village breathed softly once more, gently forgiving, quietly forgiven, humanity reclaimed slowly, tenderly, grain by gentle grain. And Petros stood quietly among them, a gentle symbol of resilience softly won, dignity quietly reclaimed, forgiveness tenderly offered, lessons gently remembered beneath velvet skies quietly drifting toward dawn. Slowly, gently, the village faded softly into peaceful sleep, dreaming quietly of humanity's gentle redemption, beneath silent skies that had seen cruelty, yet chose finally to carry gently, softly, their quiet journey toward compassion and forgiveness, grain by grain, softly, tenderly, toward healing.